So we're like, okay, what does? Okay, so the ultimate why is to spread happiness. We want to create a culture of happiness. And then we're like, but how do we do that? Oh, we create these products that have cultures in them that are beneficial for your health. And also we play 432 hertz and 528 hertz music to our culture so that they carry this vibration that then goes into people's bodies and elevates their happiness. So we're like, oh, so we're going to make these like happy cultures. And we want to make a culture of happiness. And then it was like, happy culture, and then it just came together. And from the moment we had that name, everything flowed. It was like, oh, okay, so what brings happiness? We're like, oh, nature. Oh, here in Cape Town, and what's relevant to happy culture? Well, we're born and inspired in Cape Town,
I was thinking about this conversation, obviously, in preparation for it. And one of the main reasons I wanted to chat to you today is I actually wanted to have this conversation since I've met you. But I've been saving it for a podcast because I found myself, it's been quite a magical last year for sure. And the last few months have been incredible. Getting to know, we've been surrounded by a bunch of people now, which has been amazing. And everybody is doing some cool things, such as yourself. And I've obviously spoken to Warren with Wazoo Girls and obviously Peter with Harmonic Mycology. And I've been excited to tackle this subject because the main theme, besides starting off the business and the brands that you guys have got going, which is so inspiring to see, it's also you guys are passionate about what you do and you're independent and you're creating a life that you want to live. And for me, that's it's fascinating. I want to learn more. So it's great to be able to put this conversation out because I'm so keen to hear more about your story and your journey with Happy Culture Kombucha and starting this brand and living this life that you're now living, which is pretty cool to see. Mm-hmm. So first of all, congrats on the brand because for my limited knowledge of kombucha, Happy Culture is the one that stands out for me the most in the last few years. So you guys have definitely got quite a good presence out there and you're doing something really good. So yeah, congrats first of all on the amazing product that you have.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's really wonderful when you see your dreams.
I can imagine.
Come true. And sometimes I have to pinch myself and be like, wow, we did it. It's happening and it's real.
I think most people, and myself included, you always look at brands like this and you just assume that's where they are. You don't really think that there's a process to getting there. It's all part of that process. I've started to realize with business because you're never going to get there. You're always just going to be figuring it out. But you've been doing this for 4 years now with the Happy Culture. Before we delve into that, what was life before Happy Culture for you? What were you doing before? And then what was it that was the pivotal moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to create a business and do this and create a brand? What was that transitional period like? What were you doing before you decided to go into the Happy Culture?
Yeah, it's so cool to look back and connect the dots and see how it all connects and how every little experience and influence that you had along your journey led to, the point where you could start this business and all the inspiration that you gathered along the way. But for me, I was always entrepreneurial by nature. I think since I was very young, I always knew that I would start my own thing. I just had no idea what that would be. And then after school, I decided to go to university and I studied a business degree just to build a little bit of knowledge around business as I wasn't drawn in any particular other direction. And then after studying, I decided to go travel the world and discover more about the world and myself and really just go find my passion and my inspiration and go tune in with purpose and the beauty of life, which I knew was an important ingredient before I could really start a business journey. Because by the time I finished university, I had no idea what kind of business I would want to start. I wasn't inspired in that way. So through my years of travels, a lot of inspiration was born. But it was especially in my last year of travel where I decided to really focus on personal growth, and started evolving in all kinds of beautiful ways. And I spent that year in South America, Central and South America, traveling in a camper van with Mark, who was at the time my life partner, and with whom I started the business when we came home. We had a lot of very beautiful spiritual awakenings along that journey, reconnecting to self, to nature, to the beauty of existence, to the miracle that is life. And to happiness, to joy, freedom, happiness, well-being, and just really just shredding a lot of the stuff that we both had accumulated throughout our journey. But if I can just talk for myself, a lot of the conditioning, a lot of the... I studied finance, so from my influence from my parents was very they really encouraged academics and academic performance and very left brain, performance in that way. And then I studied finance, which just really fueled my left brain so much. I think it was a great liberation for me that year, where I just really reconnected and got a really excited newborn inspiration for life, and wanting to live a beautiful, happy life, and wanting everyone in the world to live a beautiful, happy life. That's the inspiration that was born during that journey. But still, to that point, a business idea as per se hadn't really been born, though I did come across kombucha during that year at a yoga retreat in Guatemala initially, and then along the journey. Also drank a lot of cacao along that journey, which really opened the heart. And actually at the time, I thought that maybe I would do something with cacao. I was really inspired by the beauty and potential that cacao offered. And then came home, and at that point, we actually decided to go join my dad on our family farm in Franschhoek. We moved to South Africa as a family when I was 12, and my parents at that point bought a little piece of land and then started a bubbly farm. And brand. So my dad is a winemaker making Cap Classique, which is the South African champagne. So bubbles were always so kind of... and it's interesting to see that the bubbles were very much around for... way before the kombucha was around, And that was definitely one of the stepping stones leading to the creation of Happy Culture and finding a path with kombucha.
That's really, it's really cool to hear the way in which it unfolded, because so many people, I feel, and myself included, years ago, you try to figure out things before you figured out things. So the fact that you went and traveled and kind of had these experiences, awakenings, cultural experiences, all of that, and found, what it is that makes you happy in life, essentially, before you then had the vision for the business. I think so many people are trying to do these business things just out of school, and they haven't even figured out their life yet. So to take that kind of travel experience and... really finding the why,
the purpose, the why. I think starting a business just for the sake of creating a vehicle through which you can earn money, or maybe find some form of satisfaction or self-fulfillment, is not enough. It has to have some form of really positive purpose in the world, right?
No,
especially in today's world. So it's very important to have that why really clearly identified, and to feel that strongly in your being, because that's the driving force that's going to really push you forwards. I remember actually throughout all my university years and my initial years of travel, I was really overwhelmed by the fact that I hadn't found my direction yet in terms of an idea or a passion that would lead my business journey. But I always knew, deep in my being, that it would come, and I just needed to stay open and curious. Curious is very important.
And then it will come. That's the thing, is trusting in that bigger picture. And it kind of unfolds that way. That's so amazing. And the kombucha specifically, so you say you came across it when you were traveling, obviously.
So I came across it while traveling. I was at a really cool yoga retreat in Guatemala, and one of the teachers there was making kombucha. And I was drinking it there every day and really fell in love with it. But then along the course of the travels, only came across it again a couple times. As I said, it was mostly cacao on that journey. And then when we came home to South Africa, we were living in Franschhoek and there was no kombucha there. So I almost entirely forgot about kombucha and became fully immersed in the world of Cap Classic, so bubbly. And we worked with my dad on the farm for about 8 months, learning the art of Cap Classic production. Which actually shares a lot of similarities with kombucha. Okay. It's also a double fermentation process. You also work with a primary blend that goes through a first ferment and a second in-bottle fermentation for the creation of bubbles. You know, we sat through many tasting seminars, really developing some form of skill around, palates, having a tuned palate for flavors. Really gaining a passion for the art of craft, you know, and bubbles and all of that. But when we were there, we really had this feeling that this wasn't the final destination, from the sense that selling bubbly to the public, like an alcoholic product, wasn't necessarily in line with the kind of influence that I wanted to have in the world. I was very passionate about health and well-being and inspiring a positive evolution for humankind in terms of an awakening and raising vibration. And I know that alcohol, or excessive consumption at least of alcohol, doesn't really align with that vision, you know. So I always had this like, I love making the bubbly and I love the marketing and I love the business side of things, but I don't necessarily like the impact that we have, you know. So things didn't work out on the farm, and when we left the farm, we began searching for new opportunities, a new direction to channel our entrepreneurial spirits and our passion for life and craft into. And so we moved back to Cape Town. At the time we had bought another camper van in South Africa. We had like a little 1969 VW, and we were living like in and around the streets of Tambuskloof.
That's so wild.
Yeah, sleeping in like Camps Bay. We used to sleep in Kombucha quite a lot as well. Just living, because we'd actually gotten a puppy while we were on the farm, and so we couldn't just go crash at a friend's house because we had this puppy with us and now we had this camper van. So we just had to make do with what we had.
Like a proper nomad lifestyle.
Yeah, and kind of almost going back to that's the spirit of being on the road and being free, and kind of tuning back into how we felt when we were in South America, when we were living that kind of life, you know, which was an important way for us to reconnect and be in a space where we can be inspired and welcome new ideas.
And there's something liberating about having not being so attached to everything, just having that kind of, living on your camper van, traveling around, doing your thing.
And it's when you're out of your comfort zone like that you're under pressure, you know. If we had been like so cocooned in that moment, and we had, because we also had no more cash at that point because we'd spent all our money traveling, and so we were quite in a slightly desperate stage in the sense of like we had to quickly find something, you know, and that drive, you know, is what really pushes you to go out of your comfort zone and take risks and, you know, be very open to and ready to find what's next.
There's nothing quite like that that pressure of financial thing as a driving force to kind of inspire you to start a brand, but also something that you touched on earlier, and I think it's so key. If I look at, there's a lot of people making money these days, a lot of people, you know, doing things and making money, but it's the why behind it. It's the kind of bigger picture, and it's the kind of energy that you put it out into the world. And with the people I see around me these days who are doing such amazing things, a lot of it comes down to health and wellness, because on their personal journeys that I suppose we all go on, we realize that is, I suppose, a big aspect of our lives, and putting that energy back out into the world. It seems like a nice conscious way to do business. And I've never been a business person myself. I've never been that way orientated. I've always just been in a field where I did my job, and that was great. But to start a business, you have to, I suppose, really believe in your product and know that there's a bigger picture behind what you're doing.
That's the intention part of it, right?
Yeah.
So there's the intellect that you need, and then there's the inspiration that you gather, and then there's the intention, or like, what is the intention of this? You know? And that intention needs to be very pure, and it needs to hold a lot of potential. And and
there's a lot of challenges in that beginning phase, and that's where I'm at. And I find a lot of that kind of imposter syndrome where it's like, who am I to be starting this business and doing this and talking about health and selling health products or whatever it is that you do. I think when you're starting out and you have this concept and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to do this, and you believe in it, but there's a lot of self-doubt on that journey. And as you're starting out, and it's constant pushing of your comfort zones in that learning process of becoming, I suppose, an entrepreneur, an independent person in the way you live your life and do business. So what was that transitional period like for you? Like actually decided, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to start, and like some of the challenges you faced in the understanding of the whole business world and creating a brand.
Yeah, so we were from the moment that the kombucha idea came into being, which was around that time when we were living around Cape Town, and we decided not to drink alcohol for a whilst to keep ourselves clear and clean. And so we started drinking kombucha again and really just fell in love with it. And that sparked curiosity around, why is it not more available? Why is it not more popular, etc. And then we did global market research, saw that it was a booming category overseas, and then did some local market research and identified that there was quite a gap to be filled in terms of making it available on a wide scale and making it widely accessible to people, and also making it exciting, taking it out of like the health drink fridge and bringing it forwards with the coconut waters and the iced teas. And, it doesn't have to be boring because it's healthy kind of thing. So we'd identified a gap. And so from the moment that we went, okay, cool, there's a definite opportunity here, and it is calling because it was so in line with the experience that we'd gathered working with Bubbly, our passion for health and well-being and happiness, and the kind of skill set that it would require felt well aligned for us. So we decided to go for it. So from the moment it was like, let's go. What helped was firstly the fact that we didn't have any of our own money to invest. Forced us to build a very solid initially business plan and then financial proposal, investor proposal.
So you obviously, you had studied finance, so you had been educated in how to, I suppose, start the business process and get...
To a certain extent. I mean, to be honest, the stuff you learn at university these days is, at least when I was there at UCT, it was quite outdated in a way, and it's very theory-based, I think you'd probably be better off doing an entrepreneurship course for a year and just focusing mostly on the relevant skills. But I suppose parts of what I had studied were definitely valuable tools to the process. For sure. And just ways of thinking, we had to we were forced, opposed to just we've got some cash, let's just go for it without thinking. We were forced to really think things through, like every little step of the process. And this kind of business, initially you have that vision where you see the vision and you see it working and you feel it. You're like, yes, okay, this is it, it's happening. And you get this super stoked, excitement and drive that propels you forwards and give you the initial confidence and courage to take the steps. But then you start delving into it and realizing how much it's actually going to entail. I think this kind of business is particularly challenging in its nature, having your own production facility and distribution and retail and new brand, new category, etc. We could have easily backed away from that and gone whoa, too much. But I guess, the drive and the passion were high enough to keep us going. And then, yes, as I said, I think having to work through the business plan and the investor proposals really forced us to think things through in a lot of detail and create a proposal that was strong enough that somebody would be willing to put money on it, so that helped a lot. And then what also helped a lot was giving ourselves time frames where we were okay, for the next 2 months, this is the focus. And then we'd give ourselves very strict timelines and deadlines by how we need to do things, and then just be so fully focused on it that nothing else mattered. It's almost like this tunnel vision, we're and the fact that we didn't have our own money at the time or on another source of income really gave us that drive to make things happen quickly. And then there's those little omens along the way, where you're whoa, okay, I don't think this is going to be possible, It's too it's too risky, or no, it's too complicated, or this obstacle is way too big, or the hurdles are way too abundant. There's way too many hurdles.
Yeah.
And then you have these little omens where somehow something unclicks or works out, like these weird synchronicities and people coming onto the path at the right time. Like these little good luck moments where you go, okay, maybe it's meant to be, and the path clears again, and then you have another obstacle. And I think the more you experience those clearings, the more you have this feeling of like, wow, this is destined, like this is supposed to work. And then what also helped a lot was to have our worst case scenario backup plan. So we were like, okay, if by August we haven't managed to find investment and things haven't worked out, then we had our escape routes kind of thing, that what we would do, which was actually to go and trim bud in California. Like worst case scenario, we'll get on a plane, somehow find funds for that and go trim bud, and then we can start again. And at the worst case, we would have learned a lot along the journey, and whatever we learn along this journey will lead us to the next one. And for me, it's having that worst case scenario identified and feeling comfortable with that helped a lot in just taking the leaps and having confidence to keep moving.
I'm excited for this new business adventure I'm on now, because like you said, the synchronicities that start to happen. Like this year alone, as soon as I kind of had an idea, I'm like, there's no ways it'll work because of boom, 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 all these factors. But then these synchronicities start to happen and people come into your lives who know people who have this product, and then all of a sudden all these amazing things just line up, and it's like, maybe this is actually meant to work out. Maybe there is, I kind of have the bigger picture, but I'm not too sure how it's going to get there. But then you meet people along the way and these things happen and then things flow, and you're like, okay, there's something else going on here that's kind of like divinely guided, I found. So that's exciting, because I feel like if you trust in that process, it all unfolds perfectly anyway. And
I think we're particularly lucky in today's world that we are able to be so dynamic and actually have a lot of freedom to shape things the way we wish to, 10 years ago, if you were starting this kind of business, you would be fully reliant on the retail model. And so your success would be dependent on whether or not stores are willing to take you on, and whether they're going to like put you in a place in the store where the product is visible, and whether or not they're going to like promote your product to their customers, let's say. Whereas today, you can have your own B2C model where you can have your own online store. Home deliveries are so unbelievably easy these days. You can do all your own marketing through your social media channels for either free or good value. You can have contact with your own customers. In the past, you wouldn't have been able to even have a relationship with your own customers unless you had your own store. It's weird to think about that, People unless they emailed you maybe, but it was a very impersonal kind of, model. Whereas now you can really build relationships, you can build community around your brand. You don't have to rely on the system or the models, the retail models at all if you don't want to. So we can be very dynamic in today's world. And I think it's really exciting to see all these new brands emerging and coming together to co-create, the new reality.
Definitely.
And having so much choice now into the kinds of products that we want to create and consume, and really driving that conscious consumerism movement, or accommodating for it at least, being able to see what the people want and meet them there. You also don't have to have, like before, if you had to sell your product in the big pharmacies or whatever, you'd have to stick to very tightly regulated protocols as to what you're allowed to use in your product and what you're allowed to say. And
it has to be approved by SAPA or this.
So very limited, I mean, even us with kombucha, it was a very big challenge in the beginning because there was no category for it. And so because there was no category, the retailers didn't want to list us. They're like, there's no room for this. We haven't accommodated for this product. It doesn't belong to any of our existing systems. So there was a lot of forging through co-creating new systems with them, and that took a lot of work, Because actually e-com wasn't such an option for us yet when we launched 4 years ago. It wasn't even a consideration 4 years ago, which is weird to think, eh?
It is. I think the barriers to entry for doing business are like it's so much less now. I mean, for me, I'm still really trying to figure it out. But being able to sit on and do everything on my computer, from creating a website, even though it's very amateur in the sense of what's out there, there's companies like Squarespace and these things that you can design a really good looking website. Then it's like learning a bit of Shopify. Okay, you can plug that into your system. You can have an online store. And then it's like, wow, okay, I got a product. I need to get it.
You've got a shop now. You've got a shop.
I've got a shop
How
online.
exciting!
It's incredible because it's even like being able to live out here in Scarborough, which is I love living out there because it's away from everything, and it's like, okay, well, my thing was like, how do I create a business that I can sit at home and still do business essentially from home? And then it's like, okay, well, there's companies out there that do logistics for you, so you can sell your products online. They can literally pick it up from you and deliver it wherever it is. It's all calculated. So it's like the systems that have been designed these days for e-commerce is pretty amazing, and I'm still learning and figuring out. But I've been able to essentially do all of the parts of a business because I'm essentially the sole person. Tara's obviously helping me out amazingly with. But starting a business, you don't really have the funds to hire a designer or a web designer or accountants and all these employees. You got to figure it out yourself initially, especially if you start for cash. And they make it really easy to do that nowadays. I mean, even with accounting softwares and things. So for those people who are listening and who are like, I don't know where to even start with a business, it's all the systems are online. There's some app or some program or somebody's doing it for you. It takes a little bit of time and effort, I suppose, to learn them, but it's the online platforms that you can use are quite amazing these days. So I'm excited for that because we're literally about to launch. I'm going to do a lot of direct to customer. That's what I would like to aim at. And it's interesting to hear you say that before retail was the only way, I suppose, to move your products. Now it's almost seen as like an additional to what you can potentially create online.
Yeah, like ideally you have it in retail so that people come across your product in retail and then eventually they'll come and order directly from you.
Yeah.
In the spirit of cutting out the middleman and
for sure,
perhaps getting a better deal.
Yes. And I was speaking to, I think, Warren, he was telling me, like, even like this game in some places, they are quite tightly regulated, and there's certain, with anything in business, I suppose, there's always loopholes you've got to jump through and figuring out things. But yeah, there's a lot of regulations out there, but if you can cut out all those things and just do your business and sell directly to your customers, it's pretty amazing. So I'm excited because then it just becomes like, I mean, it never stops what you can, I suppose, create.
Exactly. The potential is infinite.
Yeah. That is really cool.
Which is very exciting to contemplate on.
Yes. And then collaborating with people like-minded who are also creating amazing businesses, but then ultimately like supporting each other and growing each other. It's like there seems to be quite a nice shift in the way people are doing business these days.
Yeah, the collaboration, the spirit of collaboration really seems to be emerging in really beautiful ways lately.
Yeah, it really,
it's amazing
really
to see the matrix kind of coming together. And and then I also imagine it like the flower of life, how it like spreads, like you'll have your first few customers that I feel so inspired by the product because they had really positive experiences with it, and they start embodying like the message. They're like, wow, this product's amazing. Like, I want my close friends and family to also experience these benefits. So then they tell their close friends and family, and then kind of like that, like the flower of life, it spreads, Yeah. And I think the collaborative spirit also kind of looks a bit like that when I envision it as well, of all coming together and co-creating.
It really is. It's like when you plant seeds out and then it's like those seeds, people, like you say, they'll either enjoy your product or not, but a lot of them, they do, and then those seeds go out and you can, it doesn't take long, what I've realized, it doesn't take a lot to get your business just to a point where you're self-sufficient and then you can just expand and grow. So it's I suppose the daunting feeling or fear that you have before you'd even contemplate starting a business, it's it doesn't take a lot to just get going. And once you go in, you kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of different kinds of businesses, and the kind of business that you're starting now, I think, is a very smart kind of business because you have very high potential for scalability. It's easy to ship, and so the whole e-com model is very accessible to you, but also it doesn't require high overheads.
Yeah.
And that's a smart kind of business. The kind of business we started wasn't very smart from that perspective, because having your own production facility and having to invest in your own distribution structures and lots of staff and all of that, all of those add-ons, now you've got high maintenance costs, and now you have to have much higher insurance, and now you have to have, it all adds on, and then our overheads are really high. That puts a lot of pressure on a business to succeed. I wouldn't recommend this kind of thing unless you had
in that field, then you'd have to have like volume as your
exactly
to be, I suppose,
to justify.
Profit,
and we had to do a lot of that, taking those big leaps. So for example, initially we had a very humble little production setup. But the problem is that it wasn't going to meet the requirements for us to get into retail, into big retail. So if our vision was to make kombucha widely available and accessible and evolve the world of beverages on a large scale, then we needed to be available in big retail. Yes. We wanted to get it out of just the health bubble and really influence lives on a wide scale. So then we're like, okay, so we need to get into big retail. And when you go knock at the retailers' doors, one of the requirements that they ask is that you have your food safety certifications in place, right? Okay. And they've got quite a high level of food safety that is required. And the kind of facility setup that we had at the time wasn't going to meet those standards. So then we had to say, okay, so in order to get into big retail, we need to move into a bigger facility. We need to invest in all this equipment and machinery and processes and staff, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to bump up our overheads by a pretty scary amount. Yeah. We're going to require a lot of capital investment in the hope that once we do that, and then we go knock at the retailer's door, then they say, okay, now you've got your food safety, now we can consider you. Hopefully at that point they decide to list you. Hopefully when you get on shelf, the product is actually going to sell. Because only then will you actually start breaking even or be in a position where, you can breathe again. And so we had to take a really big risk when we did that move. There were several occasions when we had to make those kinds of moves, but that's a classic example. And it was scary because we things always take longer than you expect, firstly. But we managed to find the investment and convinced our investors that this was a good move, and eventually managed to roll out the steps and get our certification. And then we had our certification and we went to Pick n Pay at the time. That was the first target. We went to their door and they were like, sorry, we listed another kombucha and we're not going to look at kombucha again until at least next year, a year later. And we were like, no, you don't understand. Like, we will not survive if you don't list us. Like, you have to. And kind of got on our knees and managed to somehow make some magic happen, and eventually got onto the shelves, and it did take off quite nicely before the pandemic hit. But that's another story. But it's pretty scary taking those big leaps, like you call it like overcapitalizing, where you invest way too much into making your business possible in terms of, setting business set up, and then also in terms of overheads. That's a pretty scary kind of business to run. Yeah,
because there is a lot of overhead costs in starting a business, and if you're doing something like that, I mean, it must be quite daunting, and cash flow does become a problem. So managing cash flow in the beginning, I suppose, is crucial. And I'm still trying to figure that out, because it's like you want to spend cash to grow, but you don't want to spend too much because you don't have enough cash, you're going to run into a wall. So it's like, getting investment ready, what's that process like?
So first step is obviously to do your business proposal and to consolidate that into a nice, tightly packed investor proposal, which is just a summary of your business plan, really. because investors don't have a lot of time to start reading through 40 pages of your whole business plan. They just want to see the vision and the overall picture of how you're going to make it work. And then what they're mostly interested in is the numbers. So you have to prepare financial forecasts, mostly cash flow forecasts, to show like, how you're going to use the money that they're going to invest, and then how the business is going to grow from there on, how long it's going to take you to get to a break-even position, and from there on, how is profit going to look over the next 5 years, and how long is it going to take them to earn enough dividends to pay back their investment, or how is business value going to grow over time, and then essentially then you can prepare a little bit of a picture for them as to what the return on that investment is going to be. So they put an X to there, and in 5 years' time, they would have gotten Y amount in dividends, and their share value would have grown to X plus whatever. And if that picture looks good and they truly believe that you can make it happen, then they'll hopefully invest. And obviously there's negotiations around what percentage they're going to get for the amount that they're investing. So it's a pretty crazy process, and you have to take you have to be very, you have to have very tough skin, because the rejection is high, you get so many no's. And I don't blame the investors for saying no, in the beginning it's a very risky step to take for them.
That fear of rejection is real, because I even have that now. I'm like, okay, cool, I can start going to retailers with my product and approach them. I'm like, what if they reject me?
And they will. That's the thing. And that's why I say patience and perseverance are very important ingredients to accompany the passion and the purpose that come with starting a business, because initially that passion and purpose are like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful, it's going to work, I've got this. But it's not going to happen as quickly as you want. And not all the doors are going to be open, so that patience and perseverance are very important ingredients to take along with you on the journey.
It's definitely not going to happen overnight, but the process, like I've started to realize if you can start to enjoy the process, it just makes the whole experience magical.
Because it's so fun actually, like the entrepreneurship journey. There's so much to learn. There's so many opportunities to grow, meet people, have exciting conversations, be creative, stimulate your intellect. It's exciting.
And for me, honestly, what grabs me the most, especially from the life that I used to live, is being able to ultimately, create your business, which is amazing, but that then giving you the freedom to live the life essentially how you want to live. And I think that's what so many of us are striving for. So many people are spending their times doing things that they would, like 90% of it, they would rather be doing other things. I want to be doing all my time the way I want to do it.
Right? Having freedom in terms of your time allocation. And then also geographical freedom. It's true, hey?
Yes.
It's a good thing to think about when starting a business. Like, what would it look like in 3 years and 5 years? Like, and will I be able to live the kind of life I wish to live if things work out the way that I want them to? Which is an important element, because in the beginning of our business journey, I had very little freedom from that perspective. It was very hands-on from production perspective, so I needed to be at the production facility a lot. That kind of became less and less with time. But then I was very involved on the road. I was visiting all the stockists all the time, had a lot of meetings. I needed to be physically present in Cape Town at certain places at certain times, and that's quite stressful on the nervous system, having to always abide to schedules and obligations. But now I'm finally in a place where, and thank you to the pandemic for being a catalyst to that, and forcing us to shift the systems and structures in such a way that I can work from home pretty much entirely now.
It's amazing.
With the occasional visit to the production facility, but
it's really inspiring to see that. And even like chatting to Warren with Wazoogles and how he's managed to now fully, also from the pandemic, go basically everything online. He works from wherever, and he runs the whole operation through like online meetings and
video calls. Our Pick and Pay buyers previously, they expected us to fly to Joburg to come have our quarterly meetings.
Oh, really?
Now it's like, that's actually the meeting I have after this. Now you just do a quick video call. And you just think how silly it was that,
Yeah.
you know,
That you have to go all the way
that
there.
in the old systems that we would be expected to
Yeah.
fly across the country and take a whole day to have like an hour meeting.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I
yeah.
guess everything has become a lot more efficient and streamlined. And then another thing that intrigues me is, I mean, as you start a business and you grow and eventually you start hiring employees, and you automatically find yourself in a leadership position where you've got to now lead this team and create, besides the business, you've got to now work with a whole bunch of people and then start to outsource or delegate responsibilities to these people, but also manage them and lead them. And like, what has that process been like, stepping into that leadership position and working with people? Did it come naturally to you? Was it quite a process of learning and figuring out? Like, what has that been like?
Yeah, it was. It's been a great process overall, but I must say in the beginning it was quite overwhelming because I had never been in a managerial position ever before. Actually, essentially, I'd never really had a normal job. I'd worked while traveling and, you know, worked in restaurants as students and things like that, but I'd never worked in a corporate environment, and I'd never had a managerial position before. So there was quite a lot of responsibility to take on in terms of offering you know, strong management, but then also creating a space for your employees to be happy and fulfilled. And yeah, there was a lot to consider, and it was completely unexplored territory to me. And we went from having like 1 employee to having 8 employees in the course of like 2 months, which is when we kind of did our expansion to accommodate retail. So it was quite overwhelming, and I was still quite young as well, you know, so it was weird to be considered the boss, you know, because people come into the position and automatically they look at you as that role. They're like, you're the boss, you know, whereas I'd never identified myself with that role. So it was an interesting process, but a very empowering one. And there's been a lot to learn in that space as well. I think I'm a very relaxed boss. I work very much from a trust basis, which at times has left room for disappointment and frustration. But it's been cool. And I think hiring the right people is not enough. Not enough weight can be put to that value, you know, the value of that. People who align with the, you know, the spirit of the brand, and who...
I've heard a lot about that in
it's
conversations and that, about that specific aspect of the right people in your company.
It's a big one.
It must be quite a tricky one to navigate, because you might find yourself an employee that just doesn't fit. And
there's a lot of dynamics, interpersonal dynamics. There's not only the professional stuff, like are they doing a good job, you know, it's the interpersonal dynamics between people in the team. There's bound to be some form of drama and complications at times. And then it's also making sure that they are happy, you know, because you want to create a work environment for them to feel good in, so that they stay around for a long time. Well, for the sake of wanting your employees to be happy and content in their position, but also because ideally you want longevity. So you've also got to worry about that side of things, you know. Are we creating the right environment for you? Are you fulfilled? Are you stimulated enough in your position? But it's been cool.
Amazing. And looking at the business, as I've been trying to walk this path now, it's a business, besides the fact that you have your product that you're trying to sell, you grow in it, and it's completely your baby, but at some point it starts to take on a life of its own.
Yes.
Because you essentially can't do everything anymore. It's impossible. So you have to just start trusting where it goes, and then the people start doing it. So it must be quite interesting, because you get all these other like dynamics that come into play besides you just trying to sell your product. Now the business is becoming its own thing, which must be quite interesting in terms of like letting go and not stressing about every little detail, but just watching the whole thing unfold. It must be quite And another thing I wanted to ask you about, actually, because I haven't even touched on it, was actually kombucha. And for those listening who like, for myself, all I know about kombucha is from my limited understanding. It's really healthy for your gut in terms of probiotics. And I've been listening to a lot of, over the years, the importance of gut health and all the rest. So can we just segue into that quickly? Like kombucha itself, like what is the process involved, and what are the benefits? Like, of kombucha.
Cool. So, yeah, quick little history snippet as to where kombucha came from. Because I think for most people, it's like, whoa, where did this thing come from all of a sudden? It just emerged out of nowhere.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's actually an ancient health elixir that originated in the East, they believe around 2,000 years ago. The emperors and royalties, used to drink it to enhance their health, and it used to be known as the tea of immortality because it would bring such benefits. And then as time went on, it became more and more widely available and popular in the East. And then when the trade routes opened between the East and the West, then kombucha started appearing in the West in countries such as Germany and Russia. And then in the 60s, they started doing research on the benefits of kombucha. I think it was a Swiss institution. And then they discovered all these wonderful benefits about it and started, promoting it. And then kombucha all of a sudden in the 60s and kind of like the hippie days became like this like health trend where people would make kombucha at home for its health benefits. Kefir also kind of became a thing around that time. And so it kind of belonged in the same category as like sauerkraut and things like that, like fermented foods that were good for digestive health and general well-being. And then only in 1999 was the first kombucha ever made with the purpose of resale in the States by a guy called G.T. Dave, who then started GT's Kombucha, which launched in around 1999-2000 in the United States, and is now the biggest kombucha brand worldwide.
Oh, really?
If you haven't looked into, if you haven't seen the brand before, maybe have a little look around their website. They've got a pretty beautiful offering of kombucha, but also kefir made from coconut water.
What is the difference? Yogurt. Like I see kefir popping up. I know you guys have got a good range of kefir now. What is the difference?
So the main difference is that kombucha is tea-based, whereas kefir is either milk-based or fruit and water-based. Okay. And then it's a different kind of culture that's used for the different ferments. So for kombucha, let me just wrap up on the history. So basically no problem at all. Just got to close that loop, you know? Yeah. So then kombucha started becoming available and increasingly more popular in the States as a ready-to-drink beverage on the market. But and then by 2010 only did it actually start spreading to other countries. And slowly countries in Europe and Australia and South Africa started adapting this new trend. But then I guess only in the last 5 years or so that kombucha really exploded as like a widely popular beverage option. So it's ancient, but recently became popular in line with I guess the growing need and movement towards health awareness and products to meet that need. Cool. So kombucha is made from tea, traditionally black tea, but you can also make it from green tea or oolong tea, or you can also use, so it's good to use that tea as the base because it contains certain nutrients and stuff which work well with the culture, but then you can also add other teas into the mix if you want. We choose to make ours purely with green tea because that lends to a style that's more like fresh and clean and elegant, and we felt a more commercially palatable option. Black tea is also really nice, but lends to more of a rich kind of flavor. Okay. So you use tea and then you use sugar. Traditionally sugar, but you can use alternative sweeteners if you want. Put those together, so you've got a sweet tea mixture. Then you put that into a fermentation vessel. If you're doing on a small scale, it could be a small vessel this size with a live culture called a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeasts. So a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeasts, which work together symbiotically to ferment the sweet tea and produce kombucha. I don't know if you want me to go into details.
So then you mix that two together and you let it ferment and do its thing.
Yeah. So I'll try and keep it short. So basically a quick summarized picture of what happens is the yeasts will break down the sucrose to produce glucose and fructose.
Yes.
Okay. Then the yeast will consume the fructose to make carbon dioxide and ethanol. At this stage, you are in an open tank, so the ethanol, the carbon dioxide escapes the tank. Then the acetobacter, which is a kind of bacteria, consumes the ethanol to make acetic acid. So that's like a vinegar kind of fermentation. The acetic acid is like apple cider vinegar. It's got a range of beneficial properties. And then you have other bacteria such as gluconobacter, which consume the glucose to make gluconic acid and glucuronic acid. So it's a range of different organic acids. There's also lactic acid being produced in some cases. So a range of different organic acids that are being produced, which are beneficial for health. But then the cultures themselves are beneficial for the gut. Then there's also digestive enzymes that are being produced in the process. And also a range of different minerals and vitamins. We also use a little bit of Kalahari desert salts from Oryx in our blends, which creates an electrolyte kind of effect.
Amazing, yeah.
So the fermentation, it depends on a range of different factors, but it takes around 2 to 4 weeks. And that's the first ferment. And at the end of that ferment, you've got an acidic tea, essentially, which is kombucha, and it's live and full of living cultures, but it's not bubbly at this stage because the tank is open, because you need oxygen for the fermentation to happen, the bacterial fermentations. So then it goes into a second fermentation in bottle where the bubbles will be created. At this point, the yeast will consume the residual sugars to produce more carbon dioxide, and it remains trapped in the bottle. And then between those two, then you can also add flavor components, etc.
Right. It sounds almost like a beer production thing where you've got the fermentation and the mixing and a whole bunch of different things going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a fusion between bubbly, vinegar, beer.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about kombucha is the symbiotic relationship that happens, or the process that happens symbiotically between the yeasts and the bacteria, whereas beer would only be yeasts and vinegar would only be bacteria.
See.
So it's working together.
Because I see a lot of people are making their own kombuchas at home these days. So it's not that inaccessible for people, even if they want to just do their own little homemade.
For sure, yeah, it's 100% possible for anybody to make it at home. I guess it's just a matter of time and space.
Yeah.
So we make it available on the go, conveniently for people to enjoy. But I think it's also great for people to make it at home if they are able to do so, just to really connect to the craft.
And starting your day off with a bit of kombucha on an empty stomach is quite a nice, uplifting addition to your day, I find, definitely.
Yes,
That's
for sure.
incredible. Manon, I know we've got to get going soon, but another aspect I wanted to, before you leave today, I want to pick your brain on, because it's something that I think, not struggle with, but I know it's something I need to tackle and learn more about, and that is marketing. I see you do an amazing job, obviously, with social media, but even your product looks aesthetically pleasing. It's really nice. But if you had to give tips to somebody like me who's now starting to try to get the product out, what are some of the things that you found has worked for you in terms of marketing? Where would you say you've wasted your time, and where would you say has been the most kind of the best way to put your time and energy into getting the brand recognition going? Because you guys are definitely, from my opinion, got a very strong brand presence in the kombucha market in South Africa. So you guys stick out.
Thank you very much, firstly, for the compliments. Again, it was all new territory, designing, packaging and branding and marketing was all new territory to us. So thank you. It's definitely been an interesting journey. Of course, the packaging side of things definitely was a very exciting process of exciting creative process, but also led to a lot of frustration and, when it just doesn't quite feel right, but you don't know why, and you're trying to find your way. So with regards to packaging in the beginning, I think it was really, to keep going back to that why. And I don't know if you've gone through that process yet of actually because in your head maybe you think you understand why it is that you do what you do and how you do what you do. But it's always good, I find, to sit and actually draw a mind map or a picture, or sit with a pen and paper and actually interact with that concept a little bit more deeply, because you find a lot of answers through that process. So for us, with the name Happy Culture, we actually didn't have the name Happy Culture initially. We had called it Kombucha. Okay. And we had registered the company as such, and all our investment proposals were based on Kombucha. But when it came to do the branding, nothing was working. We're sitting there with a graphic designer, going in circles with the packaging. It just wasn't working. And so we thought, why isn't it working? What's the problem? And then we kind of took a step back and then went back to the why. And we're like, okay, so what's the intention? Oh, well, we want to spread, ultimately, we want to elevate happiness, through well-being and through good vibes and all of that. We then realized, okay, prana's great, but it's not widely accessible in concept to the greater market, and we also want to keep it fun and exciting and, something that's accessible to people. So we're like, okay, prana doesn't really align with that, So we're like, okay, what does? So the ultimate why is to spread happiness. We want to create a culture of happiness. And then we're like, but how do we do that? Oh, we create these products that have cultures in them that are beneficial for your health. And also we play 432 hertz and 528 hertz music to our culture so that they carry this vibration that then goes into people's bodies and elevates their happiness. So we're like, so we're going to make these happy cultures. And we want to make a culture of happiness. And then it was like, happy culture, and then it just came together. And from the moment we had that name, everything flowed. Just okay, so what brings happiness? We're like, nature. Here in Cape Town, and what's relevant to happy culture? Well, we're born and inspired in Cape Town, And we had a dog at the time, and that used to be the only time I really used to leave the computer or leave the desk, was to go into the mountains with Mookie and be in nature, or go to the beach and go swim in the ocean and be like, wow, we're so blessed with nature here, so inspired by nature. So we wanted to celebrate how nature brings happiness, but also how lucky we are to have that in Cape Town, and we're from Cape Town, the brand's from Cape Town. So then it all started coming together. I think within a week we had the whole concept of using, the Fane-Boss illustrations on our branding, and then art also, right? Art brings happiness. So then it's all the concepts started tying in, and from there it was flow. Whereas when we had the wrong name, there was no flow. So that's the first piece of advice I could give, is if it's not flowing, then don't be scared to take a step back, even though it feels really frustrating, especially in our case. Our bank account, everything was registered with that name. We were like, no, we can't change the name.
Yes.
But it's cool. So that's the first piece of advice. And then...
it's quite interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. My brother's an entrepreneur, and he does a lot of business stuff, and he's started a few businesses, sold them. He's really worked up the ladder of an entrepreneurial, that whole space. So he really knows business extremely well. And he was explaining to me an interesting concept. He was actually showing me on a board, and it's when you start out, your progress isn't linear, because it's kind of up and down, but it's every time. If you don't pivot, you have to be able to pivot. Each time you pivot on a new idea, or realize, I'm a bit stuck here, this isn't actually working for me, don't force it, then redirect, find another one. And so every time you redirect, that's how you ultimately create a successful, because you're able to then change and redirect and go with the flow and not have it, okay, this is what we need to do. Because sometimes it just doesn't work, and you're like, oh shit, that's not going to work. So, but that looks more exciting. Well, let's pivot in that direction. It's a constant change, while at the same time having your intention. It's quite an interesting journey, because it's, you have to let it almost take on a life of its own, and not be too attached to your specific...
Exactly.
Aubrey Marcus, one of the guys I follow, his podcast, I'm sure you know, and in his podcast is about alot and his entrepreneurial journey. I'll never forget, he said, don't be afraid to let your darlings die. Because sometimes you might have this concept and you believe it's going to be the best, but it just doesn't work. Okay, well then then find it'll flow into something else.
Yeah, exactly. And to accept that many of your ideas are not going to work out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because if an idea doesn't work out, then at least it's a lesson. Or, and I think to be adaptable is one of the greatest attributes that any individual or business can have in today's world, right?
Definitely.
And the word pivot, I feel like was the word of 2020, right? Where everybody had to,
Oh my God, yeah.
So hopefully we all gain some good skills there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of actually like personal lessons that go through that
Oh,
attachment
God.
of like and
Yes.
frustration. There's a lot to
Yes.
learn.
Yeah, the lessons of 2020 will never be forgotten. That's been like, quite an interesting last year and a half.
Yeah,
Wow.
we could have a whole other podcast about that,
definitely,
right?
Definitely. Personal side, before we end off, like the integrating of your personal life with your business life, I suppose it all becomes one essentially, but how do your more kind of personalized practices or lifestyle, what do you find for you works well to complement running a business? Like besides all the technical business stuff, which is interesting and amazing, what are you, outside of that, kind of where you're at now in terms of the way you're living, or is there any specific practices that you do that help you get more aligned and have a more productive day? Or have you noticed like what works for your business? We're gonna follow like breaking down the house here. If there's anything you can...
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd like to say on that point is in the beginning, I was very much conditioned by the old school belief of like work hard. You know, the more hours you put in, the more you're going to get out. And if you want this business to work, don't you think that an 8 to 5, Monday to Friday is going to get you there? You know, you've got to work late, you've got to work weekends. And perhaps to a certain extent, that's true in the beginning days. If you're wanting to make good headway in a good amount of time, putting in those extra hours can be very valuable, but it's not sustainable for the long term. And so there was definitely a time where I shifted from that kind of mindset of the more the better to like adopting more of a balanced kind of perspective on things. It took a couple burnouts to get there, where you're like, I can't see anymore, I can't think anymore, the whole body's like, and the heat and my whole nervous system is collapsed and I can't sleep and I'm so like broken, but I can't stop, because if I stop then the business is going to sink, so kind of it took a few times of getting there to eventually realize that like, okay, this is not sustainable. I'm no longer inspired. And you spoke about marketing now, like that's a space where you need to be very rested and inspired and allow your creative channel to flow. And when you're not rested and your brain is fried, you can't get there. So I realized, okay, I need to obviously bring more balance into my life. And so making sure that I made my use of my time outside of work hours, made those constructive and beneficial to the business journey. Because that's very important. It's like what you do during your off time, If you're not working and then you're doing things that are going to destroy or diminish your ability to perform when you're working, then you're screwing yourself over. But if you're using your off time to charge your batteries, to get new ideas, to meet new people, build new connections, build your energy, your inspiration, your creativity, then you come back to work and you've got so much more to channel into it. So I think that's
finding that balance.
Yeah, I think having that kind of attitude, right?
Yeah.
Of the intention to say, okay, my off time is time to invest in myself and in turn invest into my ability to perform in the business. That's been, and I'm very lucky as well that the product integrates so beautifully into my life, so I can really live it and experience it. And with the marketing side of things, use my personal life as a way to create content and to share the love and spread the love and fall more in love with the product.
No, I love that, because everywhere we go, you have your happy culture, and it's amazing because it's part of you, an extension of you, and then it's like you can add that into your natural marketing with your lifestyle and all the rest. It's quite a nice way to do things. I found it. I suppose from all of my seeking and learning and figuring out things, I got into a point now where it's like I know I need to prioritize myself and my health and all the rest. But starting a business, you still have that like, I need to be working all the time. I need to kick this off. I need to get this going. And there's 101 things to do. So I still find myself like, I've got so much to do. I don't have the time to. But it's like I actually need to just go walk on the beach and just go relax and like take that time. And initially it was a struggle. It was like, I feel like I need to be doing something, but I have realized it's as important to get to bed early, feel better, get recharged, things will fall into place where they're meant to, and it's kind of like that surrender. But I can see the draw as to when you're starting off wanting to spend all your time engrossed in doing the business side of things, because you want to get it going, but you also don't want to burn yourself out.
Yeah, it's that survival energy in the beginning as well, right? And that activates that parasympathetic nervous system, right? Of like, fight or flight kind of vibe, you know, where you're just charging. And there's something that becomes a little bit addictive about being in that space as well. You've got so much of that forward momentum that it's good, and it's good to ride that wave for a while, but it's just also very important to go into the relaxed state. And I think we're so lucky, especially here in Scarps, but most places in South Africa, you literally have the beach and the mountain a few steps away. So taking 20 minutes away from work can be so quickly like rejuvenating and 100%. Relaxing without having to do much. You literally just go in the ocean or take a run up the mountain, which is amazing, you know, because if you're in the middle of a city, and that's why also when the whole nature element came into being to the branding, is realizing how lucky we are to have access to the nature sanctuary so quickly. Because if you're in the middle of a city, like, how do you relax?
I know, it's so hard.
You know, how do you...
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, figuring out the balance. I think it's a balance in everything is been interesting this last few months. But yeah, I think the entrepreneurial journey is exciting, and it's, for me, like yesterday, for instance, it was a Tuesday, and it was Tara's sister's birthday, and she had a thing at the beach, and I was like, well, we can go spend some time with a bit of family, and it's like having that freedom to like, okay, cool, I'm not going to work as hard this Tuesday, but I'm not working the whole week, so I can have my weekend. I can maybe work a bit on a weekend. It's just, your life ultimately becomes the way you want to create it. I think and
working with the sunshine as well, you know, if it's a beautiful sunny Wednesday afternoon, but Saturday is going to be rainy, perhaps saying, all right, I'll treat myself to a couple hours on the beach today and I'll make up for it on the weekend, you know?
Yes.
So it really is great to be able to be flexible and dynamic with that.
Yeah, it's really, really empowering to be able to somewhat create your life. And yes, obviously at times you're going to be super busy and all the rest, but that ultimate freedom, I think, is what I'm essentially searching for. And
I also find, I think this is probably the case for most, where in the beginning the input versus output ratio is much greater. Like you have to put in so much, but you're getting out so little. Probably not paying yourself a salary. Yes. There's no recognition in any form yet, you know, but you're putting in so much, laying those foundations, a lot of effort. And then as you go further down the journey, I find that the input is actually a little bit less, in the sense that it becomes more fluid and easier and less effort because you've figured it out. You're not as challenged, you know. But then the output is much greater. So it's like how much you have to put in versus what you get out. It becomes in your favor as time goes by.
I'm looking forward to that.
So and you know, you can only get that reward once you've put in that hard work in the beginning. So it's always good to remember that in the beginning as well, that it's not always going to be like this.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's such good advice for anybody listening who wants to start a business. Just take the leap. I think it's so worth it. And like, I'm just starting to take the leap, but I'm already feeling that I know it's going to be a process, but I know that like it's going to get somewhere awesome. And that's exciting. To create your own creation is something. Yeah, in an experience I had this year, one of the main things that came to me was create. It's like we all can create whatever we want to create, and it's like I think we have these limiting beliefs around even starting a business, and like, but everybody has the power to honestly do whatever they want if they set their mind to it and create. It's like, well, we can create anything. We are creators. We're part of the creator, or whatever that is, and so create. It's like, okay, cool. And there's something amazing about being able to create
and letting the creative force come through you. You know, becoming a channel for the creative force.
Definitely.
And I think this is such an exciting time to be alive, where we really have been given the chance to co-create a new reality. It ain't going to be easy, but it's an exciting time. Definitely. And the power, more than ever, I feel, is in our hands.
No, it is. It really is. It's a good time to be alive. It's exciting. And there's such good people around. It's like amazing to see that there's so many like-minded people, all on their own unique paths, doing amazing things. And you can learn from each other. It's like, you won't do everything by yourself, but there's so many good people around who who can help. And that's the amazing thing.
Yes.
Oh my God, this dog. Anyway, Manon, this has been amazing. Before we end up, for those who want to start a business, who, you know, look at your product and are kind of inspired to embark on this journey, any last bit of advice or recommendations or closing off, thoughts?
Yeah, I think something that helped me a lot is to have tools to bring stillness to the chaos, because there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of thoughts running through your head at all times, and that can very much deprive you of sleep, of your ability to connect deeply with life and people and be present, and also to think clearly and to feel creative.
Yeah.
So to give yourself the chance to bring stillness to your mind, because that's in that stillness that new ideas and new inspiration can emerge, and clarity, you know, whether that be meditation, yoga, cold immersions, running in the mountains, a little bit of everything, microdosing. That like I think we forget, sometimes we get so caught up in the action. The more I do, the better it is, you know. But actually, sometimes it's in the stillness, in the being, that we can find the answers. And I think it's really about working smart versus hard. And part of that working smart is to really look after your mental and physical well-being. Because then in 3 hours of work, you could achieve as much as what you would have done in those 9 hours of thinking that you were putting in the right effort. So not running in the wrong direction, but walking steadily in the right direction.
So beautifully put. I think I've also realized when you're in your head all the time, when you're going, you're figuring things out, you kind of get creatively stuck. And I think we touched on it earlier, but then I'll go for a walk and just try to switch off most of the time after I've microdosed and go walk. And then it's like, in that stillness, like, insights will come, and it's like, oh, it's so simple, just do that or whatever. And then the progress can be made, I've found, from those moments of stillness. It's like, oh, okay, I got inspired again for this, or that idea came to me, but when you get too caught up in things that are going on, it can become a bit distracting. Moments for stillness. I love that.
And then also like staying playful and curious, you know, because it is fun and it's exciting. This is an exciting journey. One day you look back and be like, wow, that was such a cool time, you know. But it's important to actually enjoy it, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, random one, a stand-up desk. Because for me, I spent so many hours at the computer, and then I kind of started like feeling like I didn't want to work. I dreaded Monday. But then I realized the reason for that was that my back would get so sore, that sitting at the desk was so painful for me. And then I realized that it wasn't the act of working that bothered me, it was the sitting all day. So then since I got myself a stand-up desk and creating different little workspaces that I can alternate between, kind of shifting perspective and body position helped me a lot to bring longevity and well-being to my work experience.
I'm so excited. I've just ordered a standing desk.
Really?
Yeah. The same one that Kian has. There's like
one
that's
a
actually
fancy
moves.
one.
I sit at this desk here and I'm like, I almost procrastinate sitting down to work because I don't want to sit anymore, because I used to sit all day, every day. So I can't wait to get the stand-up desk, because I also realize that your productivity is also directly related to, I mean, if you don't want to be sitting, you're not going to want to be sitting and being productive. So I'm so excited for that, because I think we've got to hack those ways of doing work, because sitting all day, it's just like, it's the worst.
Yes.
So being flexible, amazing. Thank you so much for this episode, Manon. This is amazing.
Yay, thank you.
That was